Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Jackson. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. And I'm here today, and I wanted to talk to you about something that I think is very important in terms of the perception of the disease of addiction, because a lot of times I think that there's a stigma associated with it. So basically, the title of this episode of Healing Families Shattered by Addiction is Smashing the Stigma of Addiction. So when Alcoholics Anonymous was founded, there were two gentlemen. One was a stockbroker and the other one was a surgeon. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times I think the perception of an alcoholic is somebody who is non-functional, who has no willpower, does not have good character. So all the research shows us that those of us that have this illness, including myself, are above average intelligence and above average wage earners. Now, for me, I don't know if I'm above average intelligence, but I certainly can relate to, the feeling of when I went to Betty Ford and the counselor said to me, you are an alcoholic and you cannot drink. And all that resonated with me was, okay, how am I going to wrap my head around and accept the fact that I'm alcoholic? Because my perception of it was really skewed towards somebody who was really out of control, that was drinking all day, that couldn't stop drinking, when in fact, episodic alcohol abuse or substance abuse sometimes is harder to treat than, people who drink all the time. So what is the stigma of addiction? So in the dictionary, they describe stigma as a mark of disgrace or infamy. So the stigma of addiction, the mark of disgrace or infamy associated with the disease, stems from behavioral symptoms and aspects of the substance use disorder. For example, so symptoms of alcohol or substance use abuse could be impaired judgment, erratic behavior, continuing, negative consequences that could be legal, occupational, you lose your job, relationship, there's divorces or, breakups. And understandably, these kinds of consequences cause embarrassment and shame among those who are afflicted and affected. So, when you really think about it, I mean, even your grandmother with a drug brain would probably act out in a way that would be totally out of character. And I'm not making excuses for the behavior that we engage in while we're under the influence, but, sitting lucid with somebody say, you know what, I think it would be a good idea for me to go out and, rob a liquor store or something like that. And the answer is no. So, these things happen when we lose control to the substance. So they also create, stigmatized attitudes and perceptions about addiction among the wider public. So, a response that perpetuates and exacerbates the private shame that is associated with alcohol and drug addiction. So, I think it's real important that we kind of frame this for what it is. So, for generations, this combination of personal shame And public stigma has produced tremendous obstacles to addressing the problem of alcoholism and other drug addiction in America. People are embarrassed, because of what they perceive alcoholic drug addict to mean. Um, so today, the stigma of addiction is seen as a primary barrier to effective addiction prevention, treatment, and recovery efforts, for the individual, family, community, and social levels. I mean, it's almost like families hide it. They don't want to admit it. We have a loved one that is a quote unquote alcoholic or a quote unquote drug addict, when in fact they have an illness and, they're not bad people becoming good people. You've heard me say that before, trying to become good people. There are people with an illness that are not well, and we are trying to get well. So if you are not well, how can you get well if the stigma that is keeping you from it's like it's a barrier that keeps you from reaching out and asking for help, and that's it's the help that you need. So the ultimate irony here is that many of the negative stigmatizing behavioral symptoms that we talked about earlier associated with the disease of addiction tend to diminish and abate when appropriately addressed and managed in recovery. So, I've gone from using the word alcoholic or using the word drug addict because the people that I talk to, if they come to talk to me, seem to have a negative perception of what those words mean, and understandably so. So, for alcohol or alcoholics, I now use alcohol use disorder. I mean, can I wrap my head around the fact that I had an alcohol use disorder? Absolutely. Do most people that come to see me, that when I frame it that way, you have an alcohol use disorder, they understand that. Like, I do drink too much, and the same with drugs. You have a substance use disorder. Do you agree or do you not agree? And let's get away from the perception, the connotation of what alcoholic or drug, addict means. So if we can get past that, and it's not just to soften it, but time has evolved. And I think that if people can understand and put their hands on what it actually is without all the peripheral stuff associated with what they think an alcoholic is or a drug addict is, that we can definitely make some progress. So, at the individual and family levels, alcohol and drug addiction is traditionally considered a very private matter, something only whispered about. Even when the symptoms of the disease are obvious to us and they're all around, and individuals and family too often avoid seeking help for fear of even acknowledging the problem. So you really can't stick your head in the sand with this illness. Um, God forbid you get diagnosed with cancer, you can't deny that you have it. And so it seems easier for us to go seek treatment for that, or diabetes, or hypertension, or heart disease. Uh, so it really needs to be put in the category of an illness. Um, that's the problem. But there is a solution, and the solution is, seeking treatment for that. So, you know, this one reason, only 1 in 10 Americans with a substance use disorder receives professional care for addiction. So, at the community and societal levels, the same undercurrent of addiction stigma keeps drug and alcohol addiction underdiagnosed, undertreated, underfunded, and misunderstood by many, especially as compared to other chronic health conditions such as heart disease, asthma, diabetes, um, and the others that I talked about. So think about this disease, okay? Just for a second, indulge me. So if you have a diagnosis of cancer, God forbid, and you get treatment and it goes into remission, which is what we all hope, it can come back through no fault of your own. However, with an alcohol use disorder or a substance use disorder, if you seek treatment, you understand the things that are suggested by the professionals that you need to do. This disease is the one that you can keep in remission. Okay. So, of all the illnesses out there, or major diseases that I could be diagnosed with, I will take addiction over any of the others. Because if I follow the suggestions, I do what's suggested, not only am I going to feel better, not only is my life going to get better, but I also come to the realization that, yeah, I may be powerless over alcohol and drugs when I ingest them, but if I don't and I get into good recovery, I can keep this disease in remission. For example, people will come to see me and we have to do a diagnosis. Okay. So let's say it's alcohol and it's alcohol dependent or alcohol abuse. The diagnosis is F10.20. Um, but when they complete treatment and have maintained their sobriety, they've done the work, the diagnosis is alcohol dependence in remission. Okay, which the diagnosis code for that is F10.21. So we've gone from the problem, the illness, diagnosed, acknowledged by the professional, and hopefully by the individual. They seek treatment, they stay sober, they discharge, and at point of discharge, they now have the illness in remission. Not because of anything I did. I mean, yeah, I made suggestions, but they did it. So powerless over drugs and alcohol, yes, but not powerless over choice. So, it's really, really important that um, people understand that, even at, the community and societal levels, there is an undercurrent of addiction stigma that keeps drug and alcohol addiction, and I just talked about this, so I'm reading you again because I want to emphasize under the undiagnosed, untreated, and underfunded and misunderstood by many. So when addiction is one of our nation's, biggest health problems, insufficient public resources are dedicated to confronting the problem. So we're if it's not being recognized as widespread as it is, the allocations for funds and resources and treatment facilities is not being provided. So if you have 1 out of 10 seeking treatment, well, only 10% of monies, treatment facilities are being allocated to that population, when in fact, we have another 90% of people with drug and alcohol uh, issues that are not being treated. So, many public policies and practices related to housing, education, jobs, voting rights, and insurance, discriminate against people who have addiction even after they've established long-term recovery. So I'm talking about like having felonies on your record for things that you did while you were under the influence of, of substances. So how do we smash this stigma? Um, so the fundamental addiction stigma smashing strategy is to shine a light on people who are in recovery, and in doing so, expose the long hidden reality that people actually do recover from this illness of drug and alcohol addiction. That it is a chronic disease that can be successfully managed for life, and that it affects individuals who are every bit as moral, productive, intelligent, talented, and humanly flawed as the next person. So it's important that we create venues for advocating pro-recovery messages, policies, and programs. Nothing makes me happier than somebody to drop me a note, 5 years after they've, completed a program with me or with Di, and say, hey, man, I'm doing great. I got married, I got a new house, I got kids. I mean, what? I mean, really, that's worth way more than somebody um, sending us a check. Let's put it that way. That's the way we look at it. So it's important. So how do we get this done? It's important that we educate other healthcare professionals and we contribute in every way we can to the vision of one day having all doctors and nurses equipped with the basic knowledge. When they go through medical school, they might, spend 5% of their time, um, studying about addiction. Okay. So it really is something that's not addressed, across the board with healthcare professionals. So, finally, recognizing that the language associated with alcohol and drug addiction and the portrayal of drug addiction in the news and entertainment media, as well as with our institutions, needs to be changed. Um, so there are, national associations. So, for example, we strongly support renaming some federal agencies, such as the National Institutes of Drug Abuse. Okay, so right in the headline, it says drug abuse, and that's the NIDA. And the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is SAMHSA, SAMHSA, to remove the morally charged and inaccurate word abuse. Okay, so somebody is not just choosing to abuse alcohol, they have an illness, they need those drugs to change the way they feel. We talk about the problem. Okay, so the problem, oh, he's got an alcohol problem or he's got a drug problem or she. Well, really, they have an alcohol or drug solution uh, until the point that it became a problem. And when I say that, um, 80% of people that have this illness have a dual diagnosis. So if you were highly anxious, if you were highly stressed, if you were suffering from unresolved grief, and somehow, some way, alcohol or drugs gave you a temporary relief from those problems, those things that are so hard to look at, like trauma. If we can remove the alcohol, we can now look at the underlying reason that may have led to the abuse. So, this recommendation is not about political correctness. I stay away from that. It's about making a conscious effort to correct the stereotypes and misperceptions that negatively impact the way substance use disorders are experienced and addressed in the world. You know, so as professionals, responsible for helping our patients reframe and overcome their private shame, uh, which is fed and reinforced by public stigma, we make it our responsibility to smash the stigma of addiction everywhere we see it. Not only to those efforts, not only do these efforts benefit patients in our drug treatment programs, but clinically speaking, they also encourage more people in the throes of active addiction to reach out for help. And on a larger scale, on a societal scale, we can ultimately and more shape public perceptions and public policy decisions about the problem of addiction and the promise of recovery. So, just to wrap this up, let's try and frame this in a way that we can all understand and agree with. Okay, you're an alcoholic. Well, maybe you have an alcohol use disorder. Okay, let's put alcoholic to the side. Easy to acknowledge that you have an alcohol use disorder. Hard to accept the word alcoholic because of whatever preconceived connotation that you have to it or fear or stigma. The same with drug addiction. Okay, you have a substance use disorder. Let's put drug addict aside. Okay, if you're using cocaine 3 days a week, I think you know that you have a substance use disorder. And so the good news is if alcoholic or drug addict is the hurdle that you need to get over to or get over or the barrier for you to reach out for help, and it's alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder, which is what it is, I think that people will be more prone to wrap their heads around that and understand that they're not bad people trying to become good people. As I said early on, they have an illness, we want them to get well and we want them to stay well. So um, just keep that in mind as family members, and also as the person who is suffering from it. So, just like any other major illness, like we talked about, like if we were diagnosed, we would get treatment, cancer, asthma, heart disease, whatever. This is a major illness and there is a solution. So there is a lot of hope. This is not a no hope, uh, terminal disease. Unless you continue to drink and drug, at some point it will progress to that point where you'll do so much physical damage to yourself that you will get ill. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, just email them to Di and myself at info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. And on our website too, there's a family survival kit. Uh, where we have articles that you can download. They're in PDF form. They're free of charge, and there might be some helpful hints in there for families and for the person who is suffering from the illness of addiction. And then also on our website, we have a section where you can set up a free consultation with Di and I. And that's for 30 minutes. And you can see, or we can listen and see if there's anything we can do to help you. If you have an affinity for us or one of us, we never get our feelings hurt. So we're here to help. And again, that's family and addiction experts. And this is the end of the episode of Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. And the emphasis is to smash the stigma of addiction. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.